Recently, I went over to the theater at the university to watch a rehearsal of an upcoming play. And at one point, there's a knife fight between two of the characters. And I thought it was going pretty good. But suddenly, the director jumps up and he says, "Hold it right there, guys. Hold it right there. You guys are human beings, and human beings never have just one emotion. Even if you're in a fight for your life, you are not always angry or furious. Sometimes you are fearful. Sometimes you might be relieved. Sometimes you might even have compassion. People are never just one emotion." And that's true about mourning. Don't think that there is any particular way that people have to mourn. You will, when someone dies that's close to you, go through a whole lot of different emotions. Surely you will be depressed and you will be sad, but sometimes you will be fearful of what's going to happen to you in your future. Maybe at moments you'll be exhilarated in the sense that a new life is opening for me. Sometimes you'll be depressed because thoughts of your own mortality will come to the fore. Don't think, despite what maybe other people say, that mourning is a process that you're going to get closure. Everyone mourns differently. Indeed, in Camus' book, The Stranger, I don't know if you read that, but he didn't even cry at his mother's funeral. Of course, later in the book, he was executed because of that, but that need not detain us. One of the things about when someone dies in the family, fortunately, there will be a lot of distracting details that you have to take care of, so you won't be focused on the loss at all times. First of all, your immediate needs. If the individual dies at home, you can phone a funeral parlor at any hour, and they'll come and they take care of everything, and these people know what they're doing. You'll have to worry about notifications of family and friends. Obviously, phone trees work. Funeral homes will take care of the obituaries in the local newspaper. You'll also have to look for documents that the person may have left, a will, insurance policies, and those things. If the person died at a hospital, you might be asked by people there if you want to have an autopsy. Sometimes they won't even ask, because under certain circumstances, the law requires that an autopsy be given if they suspect foul play or they have no idea what caused the death. However, autopsies are often a good thing. They may disclose a genetic disease that your family didn't know was in family genes, and that may help you down the road. A lot of people believe that Alzheimer's disease is inherited. And for at least like 50% of the people who have autopsies who they thought had Alzheimer's disease didn't have Alzheimer's disease at all. So that could be a great relief for your family. And finally, autopsies help future generations because they just learn more about it, and doctors learn a lot more about the human body. You also might be asked about organ donations. Even if the person consented on their driver's license, they still will probably ask you. One thing is that usually organ donations don't put off burial at all. Then you'll have to, of course, worry about burial. Hopefully you've had a conversation prior to this about what the decedent wanted. But if you didn't, one thing I would recommend is not to overspend. There'll be a lot of guilt and a lot of grief when you go to a funeral home. And I would recommend that you just don't sign up for everything the first day, come back the next day. And maybe you'll have a dollar amount, and you can compare it to how much education can that buy the decedent's grandson, for example. Things like that, to put it in some kind of a context, because you will probably be feeling guilty and you want to show that you want to spend a lot of money. Cremation is apparently about 25% of the people today use cremation. It's generally cheaper. A couple things you might want to look out for is the assertion by a mortician that you have to have the body embalmed before cremated. Now that may be true in some states, depending on how long the body has been around, but not so in others. But just be aware of that. As for funerals, they're quite expensive. The average cost is about $6,500, and that doesn't count the cemetery or the plot. A woman's husband left $30,000 for his funeral. And afterwards, she was telling a friend that she had spent all the money, and the friend said, well, how could you spend that amount of money on a funeral? And she said, well, the funeral itself cost about $8,000, and I gave another $1,000 for charity. And the friend said, well, we had $23,000 left, or $20,000. And she said, yeah, I used that for the memorial stone. You spent that amount of money. How big a stone was it? 4.5 carats. You may have immediate cash needs. Hopefully you have joint accounts with the decedent. However, if there's no money and it's all tied up in the decedent's name, you're going to have difficulties getting at it, and you've got to see a lawyer. There are ways of doing it, but you have to act quickly. What about the first few weeks? Now you got some time, and you start talking about notifying those people and those agencies that you need to notify. You will get from the funeral home, will get you copies of the death certificate. If the decedent had insurance, if the decedent had an IRA, individual retirement account, or a Roth IRA, or if he or she had a retirement program, you've got to notify those people, show them the death certificate, and then all of those things are immediately triggered, and they will go to the beneficiary, which will obviously take care of, if you are the beneficiary, any cash needs. Definitely, if the decedent was on Social Security, you got to phone them and tell them that there has been a death. And you are actually entitled to a $300 death benefit. But also realize that Social Security is more than a retirement program. It is also an insurance program. You and your family may be entitled to additional benefits if, in fact, you were relying on the decedent's money to survive. So one thing you want to talk to Social Security about is, do any of my children, or do I, or does anyone in my family be entitled to additional benefits? And they're very helpful. Okay, you're also going to find on the coffee table, after a couple of weeks, a pile of bills sent to the decedent. First of all, don't pay them, at least initially. You may get some very large bills from the hospital, from doctors, from a nursing home. You may not be liable to pay them. It may be that the only person that is liable is the decedent, and the decedent, if there's money in the decedent's estate, they can go after that. Clearly, in almost all states, children of a decedent are not legally liable to pay the decedent's bills. And in many states, indeed, the spouse is not legally obligated to pay the bills. So in the case of large bills, if you have any question, seek legal advice to see whether or not in your state you would be liable to pay them or not. And also, as to the smaller bills, obviously bills like the electric bills and things like that you want to pay, but you may get bogus bills. Some scam artists will read the obituaries and they'll send out bills claiming services rendered to the decedent that never were occurred. So be very suspicious about the bills that you get. What about probate? Well, first of all, if the person that died was the only guardian of a minor child, then you've got to go to probate, because you have to have somebody appointed to be the legal guardian of that minor. But if that's not the case, for a lot of us, we don't have to worry about probate. Because if we just have, if we have our personal property, we can divide that among the heirs. If there are some joint accounts, you don't have to worry about that. If there's property held in joint names, usually you just have to have the title changed by the county recorder, that sort of thing. Obviously, if there's a lot of money involved, then it has to go through probate. And if there's a will involved, it has to go through probate. But in a different section, I do talk about probate, and probate is not nearly as onerous as it used to be. I started this segment talking about how you're not going to have just one emotion during mourning, that life is very specific. And I want to leave you with at least a part of a poem that makes that point much better than I could ever make it. And it is by Emily Dickinson, and she's writing about death. I heard a fly buzz when I died. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portions of me be assignable, and then there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see.